Alright, this is 416 and continuing with our breakdown of North by Northwest. So the train sequence ends because the goal has been reached. Thornhill got to Chicago, and the romantic tension between Thornhill and Eve has been resolved since she has essentially betrayed him, and we assume and she assumes that she will never see him again. Thus begins the famous and classic crop duster sequence. The train sequence was almost 20 minutes, about as long as a sequence ever could be, but this sequence is only 8 minutes. But it is a complete story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The tension is set from the beginning. We know that Kaplan isn't really meeting Thornhill, and that the bad guys have set Thornhill up. But Thornhill does not know this. So while he's wondering, will I meet Kaplan, we're wondering, is he going to survive? And that is classic suspense. And so with the tension high, the tempo of both the movie and the screenplay is delayed. Everything is slowed down as one car after another passes, and we get visual exposition of trucks and planes, which seem, at this point, innocuous. The big open spaces and yawning sky set a grim tone and forbidding atmosphere, especially in contrast to the tight compartments of the train. So this waiting is the first part of a nice 3-part structure in the sequence. In the second part of the sequence, a man arrives who Thornhill thinks might be Kaplan and who we think might be the assassin. The appearance of the plane is a twist that brings us visually into the dynamic third part. Now, the screenwriter wants you to identify with Thornhill, and that means feeling like you're in his shoes moment by moment. The way to do that is not to simply have him passively run from the airplane. He's got to do things to try to solve his problem. So he runs out and tries to flag down a car. So he runs away into the seeming safety of the corn stalks where the plane can't see him. But the crop duster dusts him out. And ultimately, when he runs out into the street and stands in the way of an oncoming truck, in the same way that the stories overall have culminations, sequences have their own culminations, where the sequence tension ultimately turns out one way or the other, and then resolves. All right, moving on to sequence number 6. Interestingly, when Thornhill makes it to Kaplan's hotel, he's kind of back to square one. Really nothing in the plot has gone forward since he got to Chicago. He's still looking for Kaplan and still confused about what's happening to him. However, then he sees Eve, and we have his first moment of recognition. Thornhill finally realizes what we already knew, that Eve set him up. The next sequence is driven by ironic tension, but now it's Thornhill who knows more than Eve does. The double level of irony allows for rich subtext. On one level, Thornhill pretends he doesn't know Eve set him up. On another, he is testing Eve, trying to get her to break character. The tension of the sequence surrounds whether Thornhill will get Eve to make a mistake and reveal what he already knows, or if Eve will give him the slip. By the way, notice that the screenwriter is constantly setting up little sub-goals for the protagonist and then putting obstacles in his path, problems that he can solve with further ingenuity and action. The 7th sequence begins with activity, Van Damme's hand on the back of Eve's neck, making the relationship clear to us. And then the camera turns to the activity of the auction. When camera finally reaches Thornhill, we get another recognition. Again, Thornhill sees what we already knew. Recognition moments are moments of high emotional impact. So often we linger on them, just staring as they let the truth wash over them. As Thornhill confronts Van Damme, there is all sorts of cruel subtext, and some exposition about the perverse elephant figurine that is filled with microfilm that nobody in the audience actually cares about. Side note, the elephant figurine is a MacGuffin. It's a device that gives characters reasons to take action and gives logic to the plot, but the audience cares almost entirely nothing about it. The auction itself turns from an activity to action as Thornhill tries to get himself arrested. Again, play acting someone he is not. The second act ends when Thornhill is picked up by the CIA professor, who accomplishes Thornhill's goal since the point of attack, to clear his name. He also provides the big moment of recognition when he tells Thornhill that the main man he's chasing, Kaplan, doesn't exist. The scene also provides some exposition, does a little advertising, and most notably gives us a big ellipses as the professor tells Thornhill his scheme, but we don't get to hear it. This is an important moment for Thornhill's character arc, because his first reaction is to complain that he just wants to go home to his mother, his ex-wives, and his bartenders. This is the same Thornhill we met in the opening scene. But then comes the twist. Eve is an agent working for the CIA, and Thornhill has put her in danger. This changes both Thornhill's and the audience's understanding of the entire second act. It also leads to a reversal, as Thornhill, who just said that he wanted to do one thing, now changes his mind and does precisely the opposite. And so begins the third act. Now Thornhill has a new goal, to save Eve. And the new tension that covers both sequences of the third act is, will he save her, we hope, or will both be killed? The eighth sequence begins with a classic scene of preparation. They are waiting for Eve and Van Damme to arrive, killing time by reading the paper and gazing at dead presidents, more activity. This scene does not push the plot forward, but it provides a number of things that build anticipation for the event that is to come. We have some recapitulation so that the audience fully understands the emotional stakes. His objective in the sequence is made clear, and all this is wrapped in a mystery because the audience doesn't know what the, quote, harebrained scheme, unquote, is, and we are made to feel more and more eager to see it unfold. When it does finally unfold, Thornhill play-acts Kaplan as a jealous lover, but it's a bit too close to the actual hurt, anger, and cruelty he was displaying in the previous auction scene. Because the audience knows less than the characters, it's not clear if Eve is play-acting at all. When the gun comes out and Thornhill is shot, it is a shocking surprise because we, the audience, are in the dark about what really just happened. This sets up the twist and a classic death and resurrection scene in which the hero lets go of some dark side of himself, the jaded, cynical, angry Thornhill, and a new, changed Thornhill emerges reborn. In fact, the moment between Eve and Thornhill is such a positive one, such a resolution, that it feels for a moment like the whole movie could just wrap up with them kissing in the forest. However, this is a false ending, and it is interrupted by a surprise. Eve is getting on the plane with Van Damme, which is also a bit of a twist because the whole scene turns upside down. So the sequence objective, saving Eve from Van Damme's suspicion, was achieved, and the sequence tension is resolved. But the bigger tension of the third act only thickens as Eve goes back to Van Damme's modernist take on a dark castle and Thornhill gets punched in the face. The final sequence, the ninth sequence, begins as many of these sequences have with a scene of aftermath of the sequence culmination that came before it. At this point, a little exposition has to be delivered to tie up loose ends. Now, the audience tends to be really tolerant of exposition early in the film. That's why most of the exposition is in the first act. But they become impatient with it later in the film. So in order to keep the audience interested, Cary Grant helpfully undresses. Often to make exposition and dialogue less boring, some activity is added. Undressing, defusing a bomb, hacking up a dead body. Things like this are added to the scene just to keep the audience from tuning out. So while the sex symbol dresses, the professor is allowed to set the ticking clock of Eve's departure. We'll talk more about character arcs and character need next week, but for now, just notice how in this scene, Thornhill is actually play-acting his old self, the womanizing cynic who just wants a stiff drink and a ticket back to Madison Avenue. But of course, the new, more heroic and romantic Thornhill is going to save the princess from the castle. Tempo in a movie is often about how many twists, reversals, recognitions, and revelations come at you per minute. And the scene with Thornhill looking in at Leonard and Van Damme, the beats come fast and hard. We in Thornhill see the gun behind Leonard's back, but Van Damme does not. A revelation, creating suspense. There is mystery surrounding Leonard's motivation, and misdirection as a kind of repressed lover's quarrel starts to emerge. There's a shocking moment of recognition, surprise, and then a twist. The gun was shooting blanks. Then we have a moment of even bigger revelation as Thornhill realizes that Eve's life is in danger and Eve has no idea. Oh yes, and then there's the MacGuffin again, not that anyone cares. The play acting continues as Eve somehow fails to recognize the sound of her own gun going off. When Van Damme decides to kill her, the stakes are raised. It was just about Thornhill getting Eve out of potential danger, but now she's been given a concrete death sentence. Notice how the audience is constantly being reminded of the plane's arrival. It's an hour away, 10 minutes away, and then we see its light and hear its motor. All of this is advertising pointing at Eve being thrown from a great height. Okay, one of my favorite bits in North by Northwest is the payoff of the matches. Thornhill comes into Eve's room with no way to warn her. He looks down at his bloody hand, making the audience flinch reflexively. Then he pulls out his handkerchief with the distinctive O. Now, why bother putting in this bit of business? Well, both Thornhill and the audience see the O in the monogram and recognize it. We, the audience, are provoked to remember the matchbook at the very same moment that Thornhill remembers them. When he pulls out the matches and reaches for a pen, we already know what he is doing. That little bit of business provoked a big moment of audience identification. We are in Thornhill's shoes as he discovers the solution. Now, when he throws the matchbook, we have another set of rapid-fire beats. We hope that she sees the matchbook, but she is looking the other way. We fear Leonard will see it, and sure enough, he stands right over it, then reaches down for it, only, in a reversal, to throw it in the ashtray. And ironically, this very gesture is what draws Eve's attention to it, and we finally get the recognition that we so desperately wanted. For tension to work, things must teeter back and forth between the audience's hopes and fears. Revelations, recognitions, reveals, reversals, and twists in greater and greater frequency. By the way, my favorite example of advertising is when Thornhill says, "Whatever you do, don't get on that plane," because it sets up the longest walk to a plane ever as the tempo is slowed and the tension reaches a breaking point. I also love the irony that both Eve and Van Damme know very well that the plan is to throw her from the plane and kill her, but both of them are pretending and play acting that they don't know this. Even the action scene on Mount Rushmore is filled with these devices. Every look down is advertising for somebody's eventual fall. There are little moments of audience revelation. We see the bad guy first before the hero's recognition. And we also get time for a little character beat, as hanging off the side of a cliff turns out to be the only place that Thornhill can stop play acting, get honest, and propose marriage. Apparently, the censors forced Hitchcock to add the line "Mrs. Thornhill" to the final payoff train moment. His revenge on the censors was the final shot.